What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the All Smith Project. Today's guest is a former NFL offensive tackle who played for the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Baltimore Ravens. He was drafted in the first round of the 2009 NFL Draft by the Jaguars and later traded to the Ravens in 2013. He retired in 2016 and since then has been an advocate for medical cannabis research in the NFL to address players' pain management and different issues associated with pain. He's an entrepreneur, a coach, and an investor, along with the co-founder of Green Thumb Industries. Today, I'd love to introduce Eugene Monroe. Welcome to the show, man.
What's good, Bryce? Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate being on your platform.
So awesome to connect with you, and you're doing so many things that are, in my opinion, really trailblazing. It's not easy to go against the grain of what's traditional societal and healthcare norms, which is overprescribing opioids and doing different things to just get people back to playing on the field. You're taking an inventory of the actual human experience and then taking a leap of faith that what you're doing, not only from your personal experience, but saving and collaborating and connecting with other people to honestly long term save lives is really honorable and courageous. And so I'm very excited to have you on the show today, and I appreciate you carving out a little sliver of time.
Yeah, man. I've been looking forward to this. It's cool to reconnect. And again, I'd love to, sit with you in your space when I make it back to San Diego area. I'm not sure if you're in Diego or
Yep.
over the bridge with Bickle over there, but yeah, man, looking forward to it.
Totally, man. Before we jump in today, like you just came off a little bit of a wild ride. You had some shoulder issues at the tail end of your football career. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was reconstructive shoulder surgery where you had some pins and some things in your shoulder, and then you were in a ski accident and just kind of went through a pretty
Mm.
rigorous surgery. Will you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was skiing and doing, the run I was on was a little bit above my skill level, but I was having a good time. And when I came out the trees, entering back on the track, it just came up a little too quick for me. And there was a little jump, which, I shouldn't have been jumping. And, I kind of found myself in the air and then crashed down on my shoulder. Just kind of a quick freak thing. But I separated my shoulder and had a grade 5 separation and tore all the ligaments in my AC joint and had my shoulder bone just kind of sticking out, pointing through my shoulder. It looked pretty wicked. I'll send you a shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had surgery a week later, and they repaired it with some more titanium and fiber. So I already had some hardware from football, but just trying to enjoy life a little bit, right? Like, I got hurt again, but it's all good. I'm healing up well and swiftly. I think there's something to be said about the work that I actually put in on my shoulders on a daily basis as a result of the prior surgeries, which, my shoulder was probably, stronger than most taking that injury. And so recovery, I think I'm ahead of the timeline. And so, that part's exciting. Just getting back to my fitness, um, after going through that down period.
Yeah. And the thing that stands out to me, Eugene, is just two things that are always in our control are attitude and effort. And I think I messaged with you around that time to try to coordinate some scheduling to get you on the show. And you had shared with me that you had that injury, but you were so positive, man. And like to have some of your lifestyle freedoms taken away post football career when you gave so much to performance in a sport, how are you able to maintain so much positivity amidst adversity? It's really something that stood out to me from a mindset standpoint.
Yeah, you said it. Attitude, really controls your elevation. It defines the levels you're able to achieve, your ability to lead. I'm a father, and I'm, working my best to lead my household. in a Christ-like manner, which requires a positive attitude, and so that's everything, right? I got hurt, and I can't wait to get back out there. Most people, that I've told what actually happened and they actually saw my bones sticking up, who already had aversions to doing things like skiing. It's like, it's exciting. It's exhilarating to be on the mountain and just, see God's glory and explore and have a good time with your friends and your family. And so I can't wait to get back to that. And this injury is not going to hold me back. I'll get this shoulder stronger than it was before, and I'll get my skill level better, so that won't happen again. And so, yeah, I'm actually hoping I can get back out there before the end of this season. So,
You
yeah, your
epitomize
attitude
where,
is
like,
everything.
instead of it being obstacles, they're opportunities. And you don't just say that where it's like this cliche phrasing that sounds good on a motivational video. Like, you actually live it. And it's pretty cool to see that, witness it, and then be able to like communicate with you in the midst of all of it. And what I'm really curious about, man, like, I saw on a post that you put up on your Instagram that you're one of 16. You were born into a pretty challenging situation there in New Jersey, I believe. How did you manage to stick out and learn while simultaneously fitting in and being a part of the tribe amidst being one of 16 in a very poverty stricken community, and develop the skills and the wherewithal to eventually be a top 10 NFL draft pick?
I wouldn't say I ever really fit in, which is probably key, and the reason why I was able to avoid a lot of the reason why some people never made it out of that community. Um, School was always important, to my family. Getting an education and not being in that environment and providing a pathway out of it through education and combining that also later with sports and so just being determined. I was competitive scholastically. I always wanted to do best and be top of the class, and did that through high school. um, and that was fun for me. It was fun for me to do well. It was fun for me to learn, and I continue learning every day. um, and finding new challenges to overcome, which is why I love and stay engaged in fitness, because there's always new levels to challenge yourself and new goals to set. Um,
I like the way you said that too, because it's like you can be exceptional or you can fit in. And I think like a part of us all wants to like assimilate with the tribe and be connective, but like that seemingly leads to like a mediocre life because you're just the same as everybody else. And if you're going to be a top 1%er and pursue high performance, whether that's business, entrepreneurship, friendship, relationship, or the NFL, you inevitably need to be exceptional. And that means you're going to maybe go against the grain sometimes, do things a little bit different, and not always assimilate to the traditional norm. Like I don't imagine you would have switched lives with somebody that was doing less than you at that time. You were like, you know what? Like I see the circumstance that I was brought into. I'm going to do everything in my power to not only elevate those around me, but I'm going to find a way out. Is that kind of correct?
well, people search for community, right? It's one of the biggest reasons Bickle pushes CrossFit as a community building tool for people. Um, but when you look to fit in, you don't provide yourself the ability to maximize your potential. And when you do that and you stand out, you create your own community.
Yep.
And you can lead others into this new innovative way that you're the maverick for, the pioneer for, just being yourself. um, you create community just in that, right? If you're maximizing yourself and you're spreading love and not doing the thing that is the thing that people think you should do, but doing the right thing, right? What is the right thing to do? Which, you know, just rewinding to what we talked about and the push to actually promote research in cannabis and promote, not just studying the plant for player, and athlete benefits, but removing the penalties for being associated with it, and also pushing for legalization on the state level. All things that, are just doing the right thing. It's part of my learning and doing research and understanding, right? There are alternatives to, and I don't want to go too far, but, we did touch on opioid addiction, which, you and I both, have experience with, loved ones who have become addicted because of the healthcare system. And it's no different than athletes becoming addicted, which are a proponent of that same healthcare system, those same doctors that become the team doctors of any professional sports team. Those orthopedic surgeons are treating, everybody else who's coming to their facility too. So they're part of the same system as well.
That's a great point, and it brings up the conversation around justification, right? Like the player, let's say in this case, an NFL player that's in pursuit of getting on the field, making more money, making more impact, living out the dream, having a contract extension, making like extreme, like big time money that can potentially positively or negatively affect the rest of their life. And there's that justification, and there's the justification on the doctor side, which is, wow, I invested so much time, energy, resources, and money into the pursuit of my education, the majority of that education being in the world of pharmaceutical drugs. The pressures that are then trickling down from NFL ownership, management, coaches to get that player on the field, right? Like we made an investment in this player. We want them to perform, or at the very least act as a decoy. And there's this toggling between, are you injured or are you just a little bit hurt? How do we differentiate between the two? Because most players will play through being hurt, but being injured means, you're on the injured reserve list. And so then we see the usage of things like Toradol. We see the usage of things like Dilaudid. And it becomes this whole conversation, which I listened extensively to you and a few others on the concept of playing through pain and how that affects then the mindset of a lot of these athletes, not just during their career, but post-career. Because at the end of the day, all of these people are humans first. Before they're athletes, before they're loved for just their function on the field, they're humans. And so it becomes this enormous conversation around that, like where I started this little rant, which is justification. Both the player and the doctors are justifying to try to maximize or squeeze the most juice out of the orange. When I share some of these things, and it probably brings up some memories from your playing past, what comes to mind?
There's an aspect of this conversation that it really lies in the competitive heart of an athlete. And, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of, how you feel you want to compete. And part of that is playing, on that drive of that athlete, right? There's the pressure, obviously, from ownership who's paying, from the coaches who are responsible. Um, and then there's also the competitive drive of the athlete who wants to stay on the field. And the culture is just by any means necessary. And if this is medically, okay, then let's take this shot, let's take this pill, if it'll allow me to push through this pain, right? Because there's one thing if your your ligaments are torn and you just can't function. It's another thing if they're partially torn, and if you can diminish that pain signaling and those muscles will fire, then that athlete can still perform. And so introduce drugs in that scenario. And most of the time, your athlete may be adverse to taking that medication, but then, if they're not on the field performing, the next guy's up on the field. And then, if it's a contract year or the year before, or it might not be your best year, like there's so many circumstances that can determine that decision, that can, affect that decision. And usually it's get to the field. And so, without having alternatives with drugs, being the first, and most effective in that scenario where, other options like cannabis are not available, then, you create an environment where, how many doses does it take someone to be addicted? Some people are addicted after the first dose. These drugs work and they make you feel really good. They mask your pain. They make you feel numb, not just physically but emotionally. So people who are, dealing with stress beyond the injury they had because they lift heavy things at work and they strain their back and their doctor gave them, a Percocet prescription, that first pill might be all they need, to then seek more Percocet after that prescription runs out and that doctor's unwilling to write that script. Well, someone else is. And if they aren't, it's available easily across our country in the streets, which is where the problem, just spirals and spirals. So, um, that choice for an athlete, it comes with limited options, and unfortunately, the competitive nature that you have to take on, that has to exist within your soul to compete at that level. It almost, requires you to sort of, dance with that devil, to, whether if cannabis isn't an option or if the team's not presenting other options, which, there's a whole litany of treatment modalities you'll get in the training room, but ultimately they're spearheaded by drugs. They're spearheaded by anti-inflammatories that rapidly reduce the inflammation. And then also the painkillers that we're well aware of that mask that pain signaling and allow the muscles to continue firing.
Yeah, you brought up some really good points. Like, it's not just about the athlete on the field, but also life outside of that. And if, okay, let's just say hypothetically, you do take a Toradol shot and you perform on the field. Well, when that Toradol shot wears off and you're going home to be a father, a husband, maybe a consultant or a business owner, at the very least, just a human being in life, orienting to keep your household afloat and to be an awesome human being. And man, when that shot wears off, you start questioning, like, whoa, I don't know that I can even function in my life. I don't want my wife to see that. I don't want my kids to see that. So now it's like, oh, well, what else can I use to mask the pain so that way my loved ones are not negatively affected by my work and by my goals and aspirations?
You can't mask it. You're completely unable to match those pains and that whole, situation, right? So your family is impacted for sure, particularly when, part of that prescription becomes opioids because they slow you down and they tend to separate you from your environment and you're not as present in your environment as you would be, right? So, you're getting out of practice and you're just popping these pills they gave you, just because you're in pain from what you do for a living, not really understanding the impact it's having when, the kids you're raising need your attention, but you're just out of it. You're just happy that your back's not hurting for a moment, while you're still studying film.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. Backtracking just a little bit, you're the youngest of 16, man.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year.
that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level. What was that environment like? And was it in your brain like, hey, if I can outcompete my siblings, I'm going to get love and attention? Or was it just kind of like you observing a lot of the world and taking things in? Like, how did you find your way to navigate that experience and eventually find football?
I'm football. I don't know that I found it. I think, football was forced because I was the biggest kid in the community. It was apparent. I couldn't go anywhere without people asking me to play, and when you're coming up in an inner city hood type of environment, sports is one of the things that older folk who've been through the fire and they see young kids with potential. They push kids towards sports because they know there's opportunity on the back end if the work's put in. And no different for me. I remember in third grade, I was probably the size of a middle schooler, and my third grade substitute teacher at the time, John Bazell, came in and he saw me and he's like, "There's no reason this kid shouldn't be on the field, just like blocking people, knocking people over." But at the time, the rules didn't allow, the weight that I was at. I was too young to play with kids at the weight limit that I would have hit. So I waited a few years, and by the time I got to middle school, where they actually allowed, all weight classes, so it didn't matter. I was well over 200 pounds entering sixth grade. That's when it really started for me. But prior to that, my only, real organized sports experience was a year of basketball, which, I didn't even start, and I was the, biggest, tallest kid on the court. Um, and prior to that, I did martial arts for some years, and that's probably the base of where I got my athleticism. But it certainly wasn't from basketball. But yeah, just being the youngest of 16 in the environment I came up in, and again, the youngest of 16, the oldest of my siblings are, some of them have passed away and well into their 60s, which is young, but, um, there's a huge gap in age between us all. Some of them were around, lived in other states, but I knew most of them. And, I never looked at life as competing with my siblings or for the matter, anyone else. I just always had a thing about maximizing who I am. Um, because ultimately, I don't believe that, looking at someone else's accomplishments or their work or what they've been blessed with, helps me, right? This is my individual, unique life. And, um, I've got to work with, the tools that God gives me. And so if I'm not working to maximize myself and I'm worried about, the level that someone else is at, I'm, really shortchanging myself. Um, and I've always had that outlook, and I've had it since I was young. And the only credit that I can place that is just one of those unique ways that God made me and made me to think about the world from that perspective.
I like that a lot, man. What was your relationship like with your parents? Did they kind of help instill that value of singular focus, control the controllables, and not really allow your mind and your attention to divert?
my parents let me, they let me be a kid. Life was tough enough for them. And when my father was alive, he worked a lot, but he would bring me to work. A really, tough work ethic was instilled from a young age, I believe, from the combination of my father, my grandfather, who did masonry work as well, and also my uncle. Just, these men in my family who were the model of, just, taking a lunch pail in and punching the clock, doing the time, no matter how bad it sucked, and doing what was necessary to provide for the family. And I got to experience that, a lot, up front and personal, particularly in the summers with my father, where he'd take me every day, to all of his job sites. And so, I got to see someone really, struggle on a daily basis doing extremely hard manual labor. Um, and then I also, at the same time, was noticing that we're going and working in neighborhoods that don't look like where we go back home to.
Mm.
We're working in homes that had things in them that I couldn't fathom at that age. And, I was working in kids' rooms that, I couldn't understand why this kid's room is as large as our entire apartment. And so, while I was working, I was seeing that there was more, right? I didn't necessarily understand at the time what it meant to access that other side, but I knew it existed. And one thing I did know was that, the people in the environment that I was surrounded by weren't doing the things that ultimately would lead to that. Um, because I would never see anything like it when I was in those areas. And so, I always knew there was something different, and I always knew the place that I was, wasn't the place for me, wasn't the place I'd end up, and was also the place that I wanted to be far away from.
Yeah, the power of perspective. It sounds like going to work with your father at a young age just helped open your mind to what is possible and diminished the potential bubble that many people are exposed to just on sheer lack of experience and not seeing what else is out there. And it's cool that you got to see those things and then almost envision, okay, I see this is here. I don't really know how they got here or what these people are or do or what they stand for, but I know that somewhere inside of me I'm meant for more. And it's cool that you had that intrinsic belief at a very young age that came through the power of observation.
Yeah. You've got to be observant of your environment, of the people around it, and particularly most importantly, observant of yourself, in your current state, and also aware of where you want to be, and ensuring that your behavior matches, who you want to be, and what you're striving to be. Um,
I like that actions and words finding alignment, which is cool. What was your experience like with martial arts? How did that help you become like when I'm around you, you have such a very calm demeanor. You're never too high, you're never too low, even in the midst of high intensity workouts or maybe a stressful work call or an injury. Like, what was it about martial arts that allowed you to channel this inner energy of very peacefulness?
You say injury. I will say you weren't there, but if you were on the mountain, you would have heard you'd have heard the most emotional outburst from me you ever heard. But it was only for a moment, like just one big yell, and that was it. Um, but I was still pretty calm, and also still skied down the rest of the way.
Mm.
I figured it's an upper body injury. My legs are fine. I'll just ski down. I'm hurt, but whatever. I'm not riding a toboggan down. That's just not happening. But I have been there before too. Um, but yeah, man, just being steady. There's something to be said about balance, and I remember being on teams where I've had coaches kind of check in on me because they just weren't sure, like, does this guy even really love doing this? Just because my energy level was kind of just steady. There was something I learned from my college coach, Al Groh, who would always tell us not to ride the emotional roller coaster. And he would also tell us to treat wins and losses the same. And by that, he didn't mean to not celebrate when you win. But what he was reminding us was, whether you won or lost, and if you're pushing to the next step, like, you've got to evaluate your performance either way. Um, and there's always something that you can do better anyway. And so, if you ride too high on the emotion, you might miss out on where there's opportunity to get better. And I don't find that a boring way to live at all. And so, I think the most exuberant I probably, have just out of control expressed, emotion and excitement is probably when I was on the beach with my family, and I just got a call that we won one of our cannabis licenses in Pennsylvania, which was a competitive RFP process. And, like, who's who in the business is applying for this opportunity to get one of these coveted limited licenses. And I got the call that we won, and, between my family and friends on the beach who kind of understood what was going on, but had never seen me act like that. So, like, everyone is like, before they celebrated with me, they're just shocked because, like, oh my God, I've never seen Eugene act like this before. But it felt like, winning a championship football game. You know, uh, Experience I have little, right? We did win a championship in college. I never did get that Super Bowl win that is elusive to, most players. It's a special thing to get there. Um, but yeah, I just try to stay keen, try to stay cool. And the same thing goes for when, things don't go so well. When it's not a time for exuberance, someone has to stay level headed, and be able to, make decisions that aren't emotionally driven. And I like to be that person.
Yeah, it's a strong suit, man. I like the fact that your coach said don't ride the emotional roller coaster and treating wins and losses the same. My high school basketball coach used to say, never get too high, never get too low. Just kind of practice the art of being even keel. And I think there's a very special attribute to that because it allows for the realization that nothing's ever as good or as bad as you think it is. And it doesn't take away the willingness to celebrate, to bring people on and share high fives, hugs, tears, laughter. But then simultaneously, it allows for a momentary time, like you said, on the mountain of frustration and anger and sadness, where you can experience the natural emotions of the human experience. But there's levels to that game. If we're thinking about like an even keel straight line, like it's never too above it or too below. It's like you have a little bit of fluctuation, which in my opinion is part of the human experience. You briefly mentioned college football, but before we jump into that, what was your experience like transitioning from middle school to high school football? And then what was your recruiting process like? Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinneon Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinneon is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag, or even an overnighter. Kinneon's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to Kinneon.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
Wow. Wow. Middle school to high school and recruiting. You're taking it way back. But that was a fun time. It was a really fun time. It was really the dawn of, what has been proliferated in terms of high school scouting and all of these online platforms and all these competitive skill camps that you see pop up where colleges have access to get a closer eye on the high school athlete. Well, my time was really the proliferation of that. The rivals and scouts of the world, and I'm not even sure what they have now, but it was interesting coming from transitioning out of middle school to high school. uh, I had already been exposed, although I hadn't played varsity football yet. A lot of, storied athletes get a chance to, start on their varsity team from their high school year on. But at my school, there were 2,000 kids in the school, and many of which were trying to play ball, and so our coach wouldn't let freshmen play on the varsity level. But at the end of the freshman year, which ended before varsity, if you were good enough or perceived to be good enough, you could go on to practice and play with the junior varsity, and then also practice with the varsity team. And I did that. And, there were coaches coming to see some of our, senior players who were being scouted, and they saw me, and I got some of my first scholarship offers before even playing varsity football. So, um, I knew something was special about that. And, I was already in the mindset of just working out and training and getting ready for ball. But when that happened, something clicked for me, and I really engaged in the process at the time, and that's when I really started taking the weight room extremely serious, and speed and agility training and all these things that were becoming like available and new to me. I soaked it all up. Shout out to Frank Colabella, who was the athletic trainer at the time, but had experience, with all this elite level training, having, competed in a number of sports himself, and also being the trainer at places like Florida State, being on that staff, and learning and experiencing what needs to be done to train and prepare college level athletes. So, we had that experience at Plainfield through Frank at the time. So, I just ate that up, and I went to all of the summer camps, and just proved my abilities beyond just the film from the previous seasons, and I ended up with scholarship offers to go pretty much anywhere in the country as a result of all of that work, and also that work meeting the talent God gave me. So that was fun, man. It was fun going through the recruiting process, because what was happening for me was also benefiting my teammates, right? All these schools were coming to see me, but now they were also seeing my teammates perform. And as a result, a lot of my friends also got opportunity to play at schools like Stony Brook, and UConn and Southern Connecticut, and we had guys go to Keene University, and so guys that just had opportunity. They were talented. They put in work. Um, and at the time, right, the introduction of all of these camps through Frank, and then the proliferation of, like, again, that online sort of scouting presence where you could send in your highlight tapes and game footage to these platforms that'll post them online. We started doing that, and I started actually helping my teammates cut up some of their clips to go to these platforms and send to these schools so they could be seen. So it was just a fun time.
It's cool that
It
your
was a fun
experience
time
like
playing ball. Yeah.
unlocked amazing opportunities for friends, for teammates, and also I really appreciate the fact that you were so open to the training component because so many young kids rely on their talent. They're getting so much attention that they almost don't want to lean into the speed work, to the extra ness that's kind of thrown your way from athletic training staff or strength coaches, or getting into the weight room and putting in that work. But it clearly shows that these were things that you didn't have a ton of experience with at the onset, and then you started to see how they were positively impacting your performance moving forward and also keeping you injury free. How did you kind of cognitively create some buy-in around the training component? Because it's not directly football. It's in the weight room working on your power cleans, your deadlifts, your squats, your
It's
speed work.
desire. It's desire. I wanted to win. I wanted to be the best at what I did. And if part of that required me maximizing my body physically, I was going to do whatever it took. I was going to run to school. I was going to run home. I was going to stay in the weight room. I was going to join the track team and train in a different discipline, and then still hit the weight room and hit the track after that. It's just whatever it took. So, to hear that, there are people who like shy away from it. I mean, those are the people who don't really want it, and those are the people who don't care enough about, what it is they're doing, right? Those unfortunately are the athletes you don't want on your team. Those are not your winners. And so, fortunately, I was in a community where, like, we were all trying to get out of there, and we were all hustling and working together. And it's fun, seeing that, although not everyone continued and had the ability or opportunity to take their abilities beyond, even that next college level, many of them, for having honed all of those attributes and building that discipline, are all, just thriving husbands and fathers, and contributing members to their communities, and all doing well, and having success in their businesses and work life. And so, there's something to be said about, all of the character building that happens, for athletes, and all the skills that you can develop as an athlete beyond your actual sport that are applicable to any medium, to any business or endeavor.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. There's so many transferable skills associated with what you develop in sport, and management of people and connection with people and management of your stresses in pursuit of peak performance and collaboration of the goal to win and do the next right thing, which is rad. I had another former NFL player on the show a few weeks ago, Anthony Trucks. He played at the University of Oregon, and he said something along the lines of winners versus those that just want to get on the field. He's like, winners just do a little bit more. And you kind of just echoed that just now in kind of your description for sure. What was the specific recruiting process for you? Because that was before the name, image, and likeness, the nil for most people listening. And, there was probably loose forms of money laundering to try to get athletes to different places. There's shoe companies, there's over promising, under delivering, and then sometimes always delivering. You've got SEC schools, you've got Pac 12 at that time, you got the Big Ten. What was it like with colleges sending you notes, probably calling you, the different visits that you went on, and how did you ultimately decide on a college to attend?
Yeah. So I would say a rather boring story for me. I knew I wanted to go to a reputable school, so I was looking at programs that were ranked really high. I didn't want to go to an Ivy League school. I wanted to compete at the highest level of football. So, I was looking at the public universities, and, the top from the list of them, because, at that time I had really had my pick. Because of how I played on the field and in high school, it was really a mismatch. I was way bigger than everybody, who I competed against. So even if I didn't have talent, the offers probably would have come in. But on top of that, I was training and working and had talent. So it was just above and beyond. And it's always fun watching my high school tape, and just almost every play is like a pancake block. Um,
That's cool.
and because of that, you know, without even having conversations with coaches from any of these schools, full scholarship offers started arriving through FedEx in the mail, from all of the schools, and seemingly all at one time, as if like they all saw something we uploaded and all just decided we've got to offer this kid a scholarship, because I hadn't talked to any of the schools. Um, but the ones that I did were Rutgers. Rutgers was close. It was less than 20 minutes from home. Players from my high school had gone and played at Rutgers, and were trying to also show some of us younger kids who would have opportunity at the college level what it was about. And I actually did like the school and the campus and the program, and was building a relationship with those coaches. But I was also exposed then to the University of Virginia, and Ron Prince and Mark D'Onofrio started recruiting me. Um, and, I took a visit and really just fell in love with the place. I just love the feeling of, riding down 29 and pulling into this campus. They made me feel like, their environment cultivated, family vibes. And I'm sure I would have felt that at other places too, but something just stood out about Virginia. And it was also the number one public university in the country at the time, which was important to me. It was only 6 hours away from home. And while I was interested in Stanford, I didn't have to completely, uproot myself from the East Coast to get a similar experience. So, I decided pretty early on to go to the University of Virginia. I knew I'd get a top-notch education, and build, which has proven to be true to date, build relationships that were, long lasting and mutually beneficial for all parties. And what a network of success that UVA has, and also live now in the DMV where many of us live. So, I'm still connected to a lot of my UVA family, and run into, a lot of them who I don't know, but we're always excited to meet each other. Um,
No, that's
but
cool to
yeah,
hear,
that
man.
recruiting process was fun, man. It was going on trips in our minivan, right? I mentioned Frank Colabella, our trainer. He would drive us to these various Nike camps and these local competitions, and whether it was going to University of Maryland football camp in the summer. We just we had a tight knit group at Plainfield who were all striving for that same thing. So it made that time fun. And yeah, man, it was life changing for us all.
That's so cool. At that time, you're obviously preparing for the next level. You're getting excited for a new chapter in college football. Were you starting to think about, oh, wow, like there might be a potential future in the NFL? Was that something that floated in your headspace a little bit?
It was a goal I set, and it seemed achievable. It didn't seem far fetched. I felt like I was on the right path. I believed I was making choices that would ultimately lead me there. I saw what was happening at UVA, for example, and every year they were sending linemen to the NFL. I got to learn from one who was drafted in the first round very directly, the Brigashaw Ferguson, who played ahead of me when I decided to go to UVA. We had two first rounders on the line that I played with, myself and Brandon Albert and a number of other guys. So I knew there was a pathway being laid there, to follow in footsteps of success. Um, and so, yeah, just thinking back to these times are fun, man. It's ages ago, but man, those are such good memories.
You were just a young buck,
And
man.
many people who now I'm going to reconnect with as a result of this. So thank you.
No, totally, man. I think that's a really important factor of storytelling, bringing people together and just reminiscing on some of the special memories that helped foster and groom who you are as a man today. How long did you play at the University of Virginia? And did you mention you won a college championship there?
Not like a national championship. We did win a bowl game, went to two, won one of them. But I played 4 years there. So I graduated from UVA in 3.5 years, done with all my coursework, and I was able, right? And I did that intentionally, with goals of hitting the NFL. I knew that I would need full focus, when it came time to training, and getting ready for that. And I've seen how it is for guys who struggle and are still taking classes and whatnot. So, I took a bunch of summer classes to get through my coursework early, and um, was just able to cruise and fully focus when it was time to get ready for the next level.
And people don't realize that, man. Like the college football scenario where your day to day is jam packed. Like between weights, meetings, film, actual on the field practice, training time for rehab and prehab, cold tub, hot tub, taping, and then you've got study hall and coursework on top of that. You're trying to have a life. There's probably additional things in there that I'm missing, like eating. I mean, you needed to maintain weight as well, especially being an offensive tackle. Like, how did you manage your schedule at that time?
When you're a college athlete, it's not necessarily managing your schedule. It's basically laid out for you. All of your activities on time, and you better be there early, right? Um, and so your day is already structured. And so in that respect, I believe one, it's easy for an athlete to manage their day because of that regimen, but it's also a lesson in how to structure and maximize your days for when you're no longer an athlete and need to maximize the benefit of all your activity, right? Just look back to what you went through as a college athlete and all the things that you got done and the way your days were structured. And if they were crazy, right, you know how to hone them in now after having that experience. And if they were great, then you've got a good model to build off of.
No, that's a really good point. Structuring schedule is a fun one for so many different people and maximizing time management, but also I think it is important to have those gaps of the in between for transitions from one meeting to the next. So you're not carrying that baggage into the next thing. And you of all people, man, you're busy as hell. You're doing a lot of different things, but you still carve out time for fitness and exercise. And that's one of my favorite things about you. I love when you put up those posts.
Wait, you said I carve out time for fitness?
That's what it
You
said on
don't carve out time for fitness, man. You have no choice.
the
If you want to
non-negotiable,
live,
right?
yeah, if you want to live a healthy life, if you want to, there's some things that you can't do on this earth if you're not fit,
Yep.
right? It's just a component of being a human. And I think, more people should be aware of that. Maybe it's up to us to make that fact be known. We started talking about healthcare, that's it right there. Fitness. Then you don't need to go to the doctor, or not as much, right? Things do happen, but the goal is to not go to the doctor.
Yeah.
And it starts, in the gym. It starts with a little bit of sweat.
Yeah, I really loved you. You had a post that you put up where you were on the bike and you were like, man, I didn't have a ton of time today, but like you just said, it was a non-negotiable. You had 45 minutes and push in, pull in, and then you had another one around carrying a heavy D ball and just the importance of how that translates to you carrying all the gear for your kids, your family, and these different ski trips, and how fitness is just the vessel or the tool to give you the freedom to live life on your terms. And it's really rad that you make it
Absolutely.
such an important part of who you are as a human being, just like using the restroom, brushing your teeth, drinking water. Like it falls in alignment with that's just what we do.
And it's also fun for me, right? My wife, for example, who, like, her mindset is completely shifted, and she's encouraging other people and her friends and family to train, but she doesn't necessarily love to do it. But she does it understanding, like, it's how to stay healthy. Um, I think as athletes, if it's not fun for you as an athlete, there's a problem, because inherently it's just your fitness just positions you to then go compete, right? That's just the foundation, as a ball player. You can't compete if you're not in shape, and so just doing it so long, I think, um, part of it is habit, but I actually do love it, and I enjoy that time. I look forward to it every day, which is why I do it multiple times a day. And one, like, it allows you to wake up and start your day, or wake up and start my day with a win. It's the first thing I do when I get up. It's the first, or second task on the list, and knock it out, and I'm on to the next with a win and good energy into the next phase of my day.
That's it right there. It's the good energy and kind of a little state change to kind of get that blood flow, get the endorphins rolling. And like you said, accumulating those wins throughout the day. Jumping back
Yeah.
into your career development, what was it like going from the University of Virginia to the NFL? What was training for the NFL Combine like? Everybody's going to want to know how many reps you got on your 225 bench press. What was your 40 time? And all those things are really fun and like nuanced. But you and I both know they really don't matter once you finally get drafted. After that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the best ability becomes availability.
Yeah, you said it. Your availability is everything. Obviously your performance when available, but yeah, a lot. Those measurables. They don't matter. Once everyone is situated and all the pieces move, you still got to play. No matter how much they're paying you. Nobody cares. You got to perform. Um, and that's what the focus has to be on, right? Maximizing your ability, making yourself the best version of yourself, for the team. And if everyone's doing that, then everyone's on the same page. And the successful teams, you typically find more people than most, if not everybody, with that same mindset. And those are the environments that are fun to be in.
Yeah, for sure. What was training for your NFL Combine like? Were you excited to kind of show off some of the athletic intangibles that you had, or was it just like a box that you wanted to check?
It was just part of the process. I believe that my performance on the field said enough about my talents, to where the combine would just sort of be icing on the cake. I wasn't, going to do the combine. I actually didn't feel I needed to. Not because I felt I was above the process, but I believe I was a ball player, not an underwear athlete, right? So while this process is set up, ultimately what I can do on the field is what's most important. Um, but again, I understand, I don't agree with it, but I understood why the combine exists, and also the potential detriments of not doing it. So in lieu of, you know, having the discussion around why this guy isn't competing, just go compete. Again, I train anyway, so whether it's getting ready specifically for the combine or not, I would have been prepared. Um, and it was just a matter of fine tuning some drill work, right? Like just a little technique work on running a better 40 and those things. But um, everything else was business as usual. I trained down in Bradenton, Florida, with Mike Goff at Athletic Edge. And I love his program. We just got up a few times a day and just grinded it out. And I was well prepared for the combine and beyond. Really, I was season ready.
That's cool. What were some of your stats at that time? How big were you? How heavy? How tall? And
Oh,
what?
don't get me lying, man. I don't remember off top. I'm sure it's a quick Google search away. I might have been just shy of 310. I think I tried to just report under 310 at the time, but I probably walked around at 320. Um, I think I did 19 reps or so, which actually I was ready to do more, or at least when I was training, I did more. But again, I was completely unbothered, by the outcome of any of those tests at the combine.
Yeah.
I just did them, just so there'd be no questions as it related to my health, because I did have a pretty serious knee injury in college, which did throw up red flags in some of the combine testing on the medical side. So, just performing, just although I did have the injury, it wasn't at the time, directly inhibiting me from playing. So I just, ensured that there were, no questions about my ability.
Yeah, for sure. That's some exciting stuff, though. And then you go on to be the eighth pick of the NFL draft. What was that experience like
Yeah.
being top 10? What did that mean to you, your circle of trust, your tribe, your family? What was that experience like, and how did it feel inside your heart and your soul?
The biggest thing about that moment was giving my family something to be proud of. Um, and beyond that, I was just focused on all the work that would come next, right? I saw that as the very beginning. I understood, the levels that things would jump up. I had first round draft picks on my team, and I knew, what kind of level they performed and competed at. And then, I saw them play at the next level too. Um, so I knew I had the talent. I knew I was ready. I knew I'd go excel. And really that moment was just celebrating with all the people who helped me get there, right? Like I certainly didn't get there myself. Um, my family's involved from the beginning, and just, you know, giving them something to celebrate for all the work and time and love they poured into me was special.
Yeah, I can only imagine that experience, and just a reflective moment of all the reps, the extra time, energy, focus that went into to getting to that moment. Once you were drafted by the Jaguars, how was the original onset? You being the new guy, how did you connect with people in the locker room? And when did pain really start to play a pivotal role in your journey?
It started to play a pivotal role in my journey my freshman year in college, where I tore my patella retinaculum, I tore my VMO, I broke off half of my kneecap, and I got that all replaced. And that was my introduction to um, anti-inflammatories and painkillers, Toradol and Vicodin and Celebrex and Indocin. It all started at that point. So this was well before the NFL time. So I entered the NFL world already fully experienced. And again, like my college coach came from the NFL, and our systems and everything were set up just like it was for him at that level. So the transition for me was easy because I was stepping into the exact same environment, the exact same type of scheduling. But in fact, it was easier because now I don't have this school component, right? So in terms of the total load of committed responsibilities, it was lighter than what I had in college. Um, which allowed me to, engage in my entrepreneurial spirit and start to, dabble in endeavors outside of the game. Um, but yeah, yeah, my introduction to that pain and sort of the darker side of healthcare and pain management it started in '06. The spring of my first year at UVA.
Wow. How were the conversations with some of your teammates and maybe with some of your buds that were already in the NFL around pain management and career longevity and how they were overcoming some of the discomfort to get back on the field?
In hindsight, toxic, but at the time it was, a by any means necessary type of mindset. So, we were excited to line up and get the Toradol shot. I talk about it now, understanding the detriments of taking such high dosage of a drug so consistently. But, at the time, give me that T train shot. Like I'm gonna feel like I can run through a brick wall, and I'm gonna go in the field and do just that. Um, so the way I talk about it now doesn't necessarily describe um, my usage and acceptance of it at the time. I say that also underscoring the fact that I wasn't educated on the detriments of taking these high dosages of anti-inflammatories consistently. The detriments on your organs of taking Celebrex and Indocin on a daily basis, um, really with no rest, right? Because you take it during the season, you have an acute injury, it flares up, and then you continue to manage it throughout the season. And then in the off season, you have surgery, which requires even more anti-inflammatories and pain management. Um, so you're just in the environment. You really don't think about it. You've got a healthcare team who you trust, who you believe is doing the best that they can, and you also believe that they're the best in the business at it. And typically they are. So, it's just the environment that's created. Like we talked about earlier, the stay on the field, the by any means necessary. And again, in football, there are so few opportunities. Other sports, you play dozens and dozens of games a season. There's less than 20. And so if availability is everything, if you miss games, I mean, every game is a massive percentage hit on your availability.
Hmm. And also your potential earnings. I mean, with the NFL really standing for not for long, not just National Football League, I think the average is less than 3 years for most people. So people are trying to elongate that time domain. They're trying to collect a check as long as they can to provide for themselves and their family and develop that legacy wealth to then have ample opportunity for entrepreneurship and lots of opportunities later. What was it like for you thinking about those things and the sacrifice that went into your body, your mind in pursuit of performance, knowing where you came from? And did you have family and friends that were like, "Hey bro, can you help me pay for my rent this month? Can you help me pay for my car insurance?" I've had a lot of friends that have played in the NFL and the NBA that have had that challenge as well, where it wasn't just the pressure on themselves to perform, but it was to be able to provide for friends and family in their circle of trust.
Yeah, everyone handles the experience differently. Uh, People are always going to express, their needs to you when they believe you're in a position where you can do something about them. Whether what they're asking you for is actually going to be a benefit to their situation or their need or not is another question, right? So um, you have to determine what's important to you. It's totally okay to help people, but not at the expense of what your plans and goals are for yourself and your family. And so I think the pressure for people in those situations really comes when you don't necessarily have a plan, right? So if you don't have a plan, then saying no becomes this emotional thing. Whereas if you design your life and your finances, then saying no, you get to determine that answer a little differently. And again, you're gonna help people, and there's nothing wrong with lending out a hand, particularly when you have an abundance and an ability. But there are situations where people ask you for things, and you know, if it's money, money might not actually be what that person needs, right? They might need a complete mindset shift. Um, and you give them money and it's a band-aid for, a time, but then they come back, or never really, get, the deliverance they need in that situation. And so, but that's what family's for, right? You certainly get pressured from people who are not family when you're perceived to be, someone with, a lot of wealth. Everyone's got an idea, and everyone wants to bring it to you if they think you can fuel it. But again, you've got to create a plan for yourself, and understand what fits into that plan and what doesn't.
Yeah, it's a very mature headspace for sure. Did you hire financial advisors early on to help steer and take the lead on your financial fitness? And then how did you manage some of the temptation with girls and bottle service and wanting to potentially purchase really big things like cars and watches and the big things that we've seen?
I love cars, and fortunately for me, some of the more expensive exotic cars I really don't fit in. So I,
Yeah.
I kind of missed like on buying anything crazy, although I love vehicles. So, I don't think there's a problem with buying and driving a nice vehicle if you can afford it for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but I've gone through the entire gamut of experiences, of an athlete in that space, especially, living most of that time, a life that is not in line with someone, who lets Christ lead their life. So, you name it, I've experienced it and been in those situations and, have learned so much from it. And, um, being an athlete and being young, thrown into an environment where you're introduced to, not just a ton of money, but a ton of influence and a ton of people grabbing for it, it's a dangerous space. And so, I'm glad that I did make the decision to keep people in my corner, um, who always had my back. Um, at the time, I hardly had $10,000 in my account at a time. That's probably the most I carried around, um, from making any money on my own to the point where I was drafted. So yeah, I hired a financial advisor, because I knew I'd be managing something that I didn't understand. So I didn't just hire someone and turn a blind eye. I learned a ton. and built, a great relationship, actually a few relationships that all still exist today. And, we're still doing business and living life outside of it together. So yeah, I mean, I remember my first meeting with Walter Morans, who I initially hired to help manage my finances, and I call him my grandpa to this day.
Hmm.
And having people like that in my corner certainly was a layer of protection, against the sin I was living in, quite frankly.
No, I think that's a really smart move to pull somebody in that just has the knowledge and expertise in a field that was a little bit foreign to you at that time. What is something you did as a child that you no longer do as an adult? For many, that answer is play. RX Smart Gear allows for your daily workouts to turn into play and exploration. In my training, the Frevo rope gives me access to a versatile rope that I can take with me wherever I go. On the road, at the beach, to the park, or playing at home, RX Smart Gear jump ropes fit my needs. We at Allsmith trust RX Smart Gear. Their gear is always reliable and gives me peace of mind that I will have top-notch equipment to support my health and fitness journey. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use the discount code ALLSMITH to shop their latest cutting-edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you. Eugene, I'm just curious, man, like once you got into the NFL, you were with the Jaguars organization for a little while, eventually moved over to the Ravens organization. What was that transition like, and how was your experience in the NFL?
Man, I describe it as welcome to the NFL. Jacksonville was a very different organization at the time. It was in transition. The owner was looking to sell and move on with his life, and so the organization, I think, just wasn't run as well as it should be, or at least with the winning culture that I stepped into when I got to Baltimore. So it was a welcome experience. It was an environment that you could thrive in because everyone around was maximizing their potential at all times. You didn't have, egos where, anybody was treated any differently or acted any differently. Everyone was after the same purpose, winning football games. And so, what a place to be. I loved my time in Baltimore. And learned so much, not just about building teams but running business and how organizations are able to find success. Because again, when you're an athlete in a professional sport, there's so much to learn about how a multi-million-dollar operation is run. If you just clue on to what you experienced during your time. And I was, again, very observant. And so I learned a ton that has been applicable to ventures that, have nothing to do with any sports.
What would you say are the top three differences in the way the organizations were run, aside from the care? And it sounds like a little bit more of like the give a shit component, considering Jacksonville, the owner wanted to sell, which sounds like there wasn't really expectations for top level performance. It was just kind of like check the box of show up. And then you get to an organization that's like trying to maximize every bit of human potential. What would you say were the big three that were like major differences and takeaways for you into the business world?
I think from the top, setting a vision that's clearly communicated and demonstrated by leadership. Um, a leadership that delegates powers and responsibility um, to the highest and best use of the team and achieving the goals set under that vision. Um, and then also, again, at the top, because leadership is everything, a leadership position where the top is all about service, right? Ensuring that everyone around you is empowered to maximize their ability, and you put people in best position to perform at a high level. And when those things are married, because attitude and discipline, those things don't rise up from the ranks. They're distributed from the top. And so that all aligned in Baltimore. There's a strong sense of leadership, throughout management and everyone who runs that building.
What year was that, and who were some of the teammates that you played with?
Yeah, I played. I was traded in 2013. Wow, over a decade ago now. Yeah, 2013. Joe Flacco, Ray Rice, Jeremy Zuta, Kelechi Simile. I man, so many guys. Some who played years and years. Some who are coaching. It's fun connecting with all of the guys that I came to Baltimore and played with. Um, every year you have a completely different team, and it's rare that a small few guys play for many years together. I got a chance to play for a few years with a couple guys who remain friends to this day, and yeah, cherishing those friendships and ensuring that you continue to cultivate them long after the game is important too. So.
Yeah, that's cool. What was it like being in the trenches with those guys and just kind of steering the conversation towards your post-career life? Like, what was pain management like for you and some of the guys in that locker room?
Everybody's in pain. So, to ask what was pain management like is to ask, how did you exist in the locker room? It just is what it is. Everybody's in pain. Everyone's, after practice and after games, everyone's in the training room managing their different injuries and ailments. So that's just part of the culture of the sport. Everyone's in pain. So it's not necessarily something you even go around talking about because you all experience it, you all deal with it, and you all see each other actively managing it on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Were there any special techniques that people used aside from the doctors prescribing opioids? Were there ice baths? Were there different laser treatments? Was there massage or acupuncture or all of the above?
It's funny you say ice baths. There's like a proliferation of ice baths as a culture and a thing, and all these ice tank companies coming
Hmm.
out, and like that stuff's so commonplace in sports. It's laughable to see all of this happen now.
Yeah.
We've been dunking ice tanks since middle school. And so it's just always funny to me to see a group of people like do a cold plunge. Like, we were doing this every day, not as a thing, but just because we had to survive.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
It's that funny thing. You've probably seen it, the Gronkowski and Julian Edelman, and they love to go do the we're retired athletes. We like to talk about cold plunges.
hmm Yeah, I mean they're making light of the same situation I just mentioned.
For
It's
sure.
just funny to see, but you know I understand the benefits, so I understand why it's become so big. But um, it's nothing new, and it's been around forever. I
I
mean,
totally agree with that. The one place I'll push back a little bit though is like at that time icing was known to be like a form of anti-inflammatory component or pain management. And there's a gentleman named Gary Raynal who I've actually talked with quite a bit, and he's the author of a book called Iced. And I think we've come to realize now that the ice bath is more for breathing. It's more for the management of anxiety and stress, the dopamine hit that's going to come. It will help a little bit with pain management, but they're actually saying now, as far as injury rehab, it's actually not the best to ice different tissues. And I think that's the difference. Where at that time, it was like, dude, we're doing this to survive. It makes us feel better and gets us back on the field to keep performing at a high level. But I think for the recreational use, there's so many people that were foreign to it that maybe haven't been in a basketball or a football or a track locker room, And so I always think it's really cool to see how these like high level techniques that have been used for the last 2 decades for pros are now bleeding into the recreational population.
No, again, I think there's a lot of advancements that happen in those spaces that, non-athletes don't get exposure to. And that's just one of the treatment modalities that's been around forever, that's been understood for, in sports for all of those very reasons, not just for, acute injury and inflammation, but for all the other benefits we know we get out of ice bathing. Um,
Totally.
but I think we'll see, and as technology improves, I think we'll see, smaller and more accessible versions of, some of these things. Like there was a time I seen, for example, coming even to Invictus and watching athletes, walk around with their own portable stim units. Like previously, you got to be sort of in that athletic environment in the training room, like hooked up to a machine. Now you can couple $100 have that as a tool no matter who you are. So you're right, like seeing the more sort of recreational use and application of these tools for benefits for people who, you might not be competing at a high level, but if you're going to the gym every day, or if you just, live a life and have a job that requires, physical activity that's repetitive and creates injury, now these things are becoming common practice to most people, which I think is cool.
Yeah, totally. What was the experience with the transition from like the Advil, the Motrin, the Tylenol, eventually to the Vicodin, the Dilaudid, the Toradol? Like, how do you differentiate when each one is necessary? And what are your thoughts now as to provide
There a
enhanced education?
transition? I didn't
I don't
think
know.
there was a transition. Yeah, I mean, at least in my experience, I don't necessarily have a transition period from weaker drugs to the next. I had a traumatic injury my first year in college, which was the very start of my introduction to pharmaceuticals. So very immediately I was put on the, anti-inflammatories and the Vicodins of the world. So, I really didn't transition up from the Tylenol to that. It was just that. And Tylenol might have, been in use for, one of those drugs if in combination with the other drug, I needed something between the window of time for the next dosage of the other drug. So it was more so titrating more powerful drugs, if anything, versus a progression of one drug to a higher one.
Man, I mean, I'm like pausing in like awe because were you aware of that at that time? Like, obviously, now in
Not
retrospect,
at
like,
all. I had no idea, Bryce. It was, I was doing whatever I could to stay on the field. Um, I trusted the team docs, and it's the same system that your father was in. It's no different.
mhm.
Treat the pain with the drug, and particularly in sports, like if that's going to allow you to perform, then it's a no-brainer. Especially if this is allowed and legal, and we can all do this. Yeah, go ahead, take that pill, and that's the culture I was in, and that's how I operated. Now, there's players who detest pills. But unfortunately for me, at the time I wasn't one of them. And very early in my career, I had a pretty serious injury, which came with, a surgery and then prescription drugs.
At what
So it wasn't
point?
presented in 2006. We weren't hearing about opioid addiction. It
Yeah.
wasn't a thing. You
Mhm.
just took the Vicodin.
And there was tremendous trust between the player and the training staff. And, that's not necessarily to fault the training staff. Maybe they just knew what they were trying to prescribe based on their education within the total problem, which is the system. When did
That's a
you
great point.
eventually get, go ahead?
No, sorry, just a great point, right? These docs were not or at least, the hope is that I don't believe any of them that I dealt with were prescribing these pills in a nefarious way. Like these were
Yeah.
effective medications to prescribe your athletes, devoid of the information of the addictive potential. And even if they did understand the addictive potential of these drugs, I don't believe they fully considered, what would happen at the end of the prescriptions they were writing.
Yep.
I don't think they considered that their athletes would still seek drugs after those prescriptions. We know that's the case now.
Yeah. It was a very new time for sure. You don't know what you don't
Hmm.
know. You have the pressure of, I need to get this athlete out of pain so they can perform. And you're doing a job and you're not really sure of the long term usage of some of these medications. And now we've learned things over the course of time. For you, Eugene, when did you kind of put your foot down and be like, okay, I'm seeing the patterns here. I'm seeing the long term negative side effects of some of these things. I'm seeing the addictive nature of Toradol specifically, since that seems to be the one that's talked about most, especially from some of the documentaries I've seen with like Aaron Hernandez and some of the most recent things. When did you put your foot down and think, okay, I'm going to enhance research education to try to integrate a change, and maybe a thought conversation sparked around the use of cannabis?
Dr. Julie Buckley, who is family. I love her. My family does too. All our families are one big family together. Um, she's a physician in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, who saw that I was concussed during a game in Jacksonville, and after the game knew where all the families hung out and found my wife, and encouraged her to bring me into the office because she knew something was wrong. But obviously the culture of the league at the time, they didn't have second eyes on players, determining who might be concussed and whatnot. And so, um, that was really the start of the complete 180 of all things health for me, in terms of, the base of it all, starting with nutrition, and then understanding what was happening to my brain as a result of playing football, and one, how to get ahead of some of the more long-term effects of traumatic brain injury, and two, like how to stay active and sharp and alert, um, in the environment that I was in, uh, without consuming pharmaceutical drugs. And so, she changed my life in that regard, and set probably a new health destination for my family for generations to come as a result. If not just on the impact of nutrition alone, but certainly all of the other healing modalities that she introduced me to, for brain health. And so yeah, just that's Dr. Julie Buckley. I can't wait to reconnect with her soon too.
That's so special, man. And when she started talking to you about nutrition, correct me if I'm wrong, but you played a position where you needed to maintain weight. I believe you were upwards of 350 pounds for quite a while. And if you go above that or below that, I believe you get fined if you don't fit within the parameters of what your contractual agreement says. How did you manage maintaining weight and the nutritional experiences that you were navigating at that time to know what's good for health, but also what's going to keep you being a pro?
Yeah, I mean it's simple. Weight, is sort of a vague term, which I kind of look at the combination of the lean body mass you're carrying, and then what's not. And then, being alignment, certainly your weight is important, mass moves mass, and you can't be a small guy trying to move around big guys. It just does not work. Um, but you also, don't want to be carrying unnecessary weight that is no benefit to your performance and actually a hindrance. And so, understanding the balance between uh, the work required for you to train and get in shape, to also then and go do your sport specific, training and performance. It's definitely a balance, understanding just on a simple like macro basis, the calories in that you need to maintain, and then also like having this goal of achieving or maintaining a certain weight, the calorie intake in order to do that, and beyond that, right? Not just the numbers, but the quality of what's coming in. So one, what does your body most efficiently process? What foods are going to be beneficial on an inflammation basis, because everything you do as an athlete causes inflammation, and so how do you manage that so you can perform? And just understanding how to schedule and prepare your nutrition on a daily basis so you're meeting all those goals. And so, I had a lot of help in coming, to those numbers and understanding, um, through testing, what my blood looked like, and what foods I was sensitive to and what was causing inflammation versus reducing it. And so once I fine tuned all of that, things became pretty easy. Yeah, and that's knowledge I like to give a lot of athletes, that a lot of people are just blessed with the ability to go eat McDonald's every day, and I had teammates that were 3% body fat and could eat anything they wanted to. But that doesn't mean that they're performing as high as they could be. And what does that look like if you were actually honing that in? Um, it's so important. So, yeah, I got the sort of nutrition and training piece down, to a critical science, which, helped me excel on the field.
I like that. I think it's always very important to practice the art of trial and error, kind of reflect on like a personal body scan of, inflammatory markers from your feet all the way up the chain to the knees, the hips, the midline, the shoulder, the neck, the head space, and how certain foods, certain habits are then positively or negatively affecting us. And then from there, doing something like a blood panel to get a peek under the hood of what's actually going on when I consume certain foods or do certain modalities. That's a really cool thing that you integrated that level of data collection for yourself. And then we're able to have some habit change, and we're willing to do that, not just during your career, but continually now. What were some of the other healing modalities that you started incorporating as far as just the management after that concussive incident in Jacksonville? And what would you suggest for current NFL players that are trying to practice some of these modalities and not utilize opioids?
Look, uniquely, most players um, have a general distrust, whether it's picked up on from conversation in the locker room, or coming down from agents and other people. Um, Many players seek treatment outside of the locker room anyway. So many are already experiencing and exposing themselves to treatment modalities that aren't available to most. And I think to leave away to give you and your audience something that benefited me most beneficially. Um, I think the stem cell treatments that I did changed the game. For the pain levels in my knee after the injuries I suffered, um, my shoulder, big toe injury I had that got so bad at a point I used to cut an X over my big toe in my cleat, whether it was brand new or not, I had to take the pressure. Even just the material on the cleat touching my toe would cause just crazy pain and inflammation. So
Mm.
just getting a stem cell procedure, and that also was a big deal too. So um, finding a practitioner that's certified and reputable, and um, the way it was administered too was probably different. And so, without digging too much in the weeds here on that, I think if you've got injuries that are chronic, um, that could be an option for you if it's not something you've explored. It certainly was a great benefit to me. And at one point in my career, I was looking at my knee as a detriment, but I was able after that procedure to rebuild it to a point where it became part of my strong suit.
That's rad. We've been able to connect with a few professional athletes, including big wave surfer Shane Dorian, who actually the week after we spoke to him, or sorry, the week prior to us speaking to him, went down to Mexico and did a bunch of stem cell treatments along his spine, his shoulder, and his knees as well. And we've connected with some naturopathic doctors that have given some great insight into not just stem cell but PRP treatments to try to enhance the tissue regeneration. For some people it's keeping them away
Yeah.
from surgery, and for some people it's helping them rehab post surgery. And so I
Yeah, I would
definitely am
say
pumped.
PRP was like the precursor, right? PRP was the step that you could get done. You could go to your team doctor and they'll handle that. Um, but the access to stem cell treatments was a little it's a little more scarce, I would say. So, like you mentioned, your buddy who surfs, who went down to Mexico and had to travel for that, and there's like the stories of Kobe Bryant in the past
Hmm.
traveling to get special things done. Depending on your network, those things are accessible here in the U.S. too. Um, but I think it is something that's more widely available in other places.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've read in numerous places, Eugene, you say something along the lines of cannabis replaced the need for pharmaceutical pain meds and anti-inflammatories. What was your original integration or your first meeting with cannabis when you were like, whoa, this is actually a game changer for me in my pain management journey, and I want to find a way to integrate this to other people that are trying to heal and make it through their NFL career?
Yeah, so I had a surgery that, again, like most surgeries of orthopedic nature, come with a prescription of painkillers to manage pain, to manage any breakthrough pain. And I was taking those on schedule. And I'll never forget this. I was in my rocking chair. It was a shoulder surgery, so it's difficult to lay down and sleep after you have your shoulder repaired. So I'm in my recliner, and I don't recognize that it's my daughter who's walking through the double doors of my bedroom, um, coming in to talk to me. And she's just barely 2 at the time. But I'm like, who's this kid? And I don't know what clicked for me, what snapped for me, what made me immediately think of why I was, spacing out and not recognizing my own kid, but it was the Vicodin that I was taking, um, that was making me loopy in that way. And fortunately, just timing it couldn't have been better. I had already started researching how cannabis was being used to treat inflammation and pain. It just wasn't something I was willing to commit to and try because we'd be penalized for it if you test positive. So I just got tired, and after experiencing, that moment with my kid, I decided enough was enough, and I stopped taking the pills. And it's easy enough to find cannabis at the time in Maryland. Here it had legalized, but the process had not yet birthed the industry where there's production and access to it. And so, where else do you get it? Streets, legacy market. Um, and it opened my eyes and really it changed my life. It changed the direction of everything I was doing and learning and engaging in. At that point, I realized everything that we were told as athletes was a lie. Um, that this plant that just happens to grow, if you consume it, not only does it have the pain relieving benefits of, the Vicodin I was taking, it had the anti inflammation benefits of the Celebrex and Indocin I was taking. Um, it also didn't put me out of my mind. Now, did it, provide effects of euphoria? Yes, it felt good, and it was okay to feel good because the injury felt pretty bad. Um, and I kept studying and not just reading, but that studying went from, doing all I could by myself to, flying across the country and, meeting doctors who were sort of in this fight to promote cannabis, as something that's medically effective and not this stigmatized plant that most people have, the completely wrong perspective of because of, how it's been demonized and criminalized. Um, which is, completely separate from what we actually are looking at with this plant. And so, I'd learned so much, been exposed to, not only doctors and mothers and patients and kids whose lives were completely different because they introduced cannabis. I reached the point where enough was enough. It was time to tell the truth about the plant and promote the use and access of it in lieu of opioids because I found that what I was reading and learning and hearing was true, and I was experiencing it for myself at the same time, just having had surgery, doing things their way, and then swapping over to cannabis and finding that not only am I relieving myself of this pain and of this stress and of this inflammation, it's also doing it faster and doing it better, um, without the detriment of potentially becoming hooked on pills that could kill me. Um,
I like
that was
hearing
enough in
your
itself.
recollection of it, which is very special. And I think you're really brave to attack this head on because it's at such a pivotal moment where cannabis is starting to really make a difference in our world. We've seen it legalized across most states at this point. Why do you believe that it was criminalized and demonized for so long in association to just is it the challenge of dosage? Is it the monetization associated with not understanding it? Is it the fight against big pharma? What do you think seems to be the biggest missing link there and why it was penalized for high level
There's,
athletes?
so it's not the fact that it's penalized for high level athletes. It's something that unfortunately became a political tool years and years ago. And to spare you a history lesson, I would say, unfortunately, the illegality and the proliferation of cannabis as this dangerous substance and the stigma behind it was born in racism. And legal changes that effectively allowed communities to be over policed for years and years and years and really just ravaged communities, including the one I grew up in. So a proponent of that just extends into sports where like there's obviously an enormous tie-in with sports and law enforcement, the protection they provide sports, the marriage there, and just toting a line to where it just became a stigmatized thing that's deeply entrenched in when you look at who owns the NFL teams, the era they're from, um, these things were proliferated during those times. And so, you know, I'm glad we're in an era now where, athletes like myself have been bold enough to promote the need for change, to promote the understanding that how we frame cannabis prior is archaic and out of line with the science. And if we look at this, for what it's actually doing and how it's actually healing people and providing relief and not doing all of these things that, people perceive cannabis to do in a negative way, um, we would all see this very differently. And so, it wasn't about being brave. It was just about doing the right thing. Like here I am, a proponent of a system that has been lying to me, and I have an opportunity to be a voice to create and change that, quite frankly, could save lives. I've that family members, die over opioids, and friends, and meet people, all the time I mean, there's so many people. It's hard to not meet someone in 2024 that isn't close to someone who's been affected by this. And if I can help put a dent in that, like, why wouldn't I? Um, it was imperative at that point. So it really wasn't about going against the grain or being brave. It was just doing the right thing. Like, you guys need to know the truth about this. And by the way, instead of punishing players for it, maybe you need to educate yourself on this. And it's something that, you might find is a useful tool that could get more production out of your athletes, even uh, help them live healthier lives, and at the very least, prevent them from becoming addicted to the pills you prescribe them.
Yeah, I know you say it's not about the bold thing, but I mean you could very easily have all this knowledge and education and talk about it quietly to your close circle, but you've been forward
But it would
facing.
only do good for me.
Totally.
It would only be good for me, right? There's so many players that are going to keep playing. The game's only growing. They're talking about expanding teams and expanding, the number of games played even again. So the game of football is only, growing, and athletes aren't getting any smaller. They're getting bigger, faster,
Oh yeah.
stronger. We know our kids are specializing in training at much younger ages than we even saw. And so, understanding that the game's also not getting safer. You've got people who are able to excel themselves even more powerful than before, colliding heads. And so, I think, getting that information out is imperative.
Yeah. And that's kind of my point is your level of selflessness to put yourself out there and be such a leader as far as medical cannabis research, policy reform. Who are some of the other people that are joining you in pursuit of trying to have more education and talking about the use of cannabis in relation to some of the other things that have been used that have tremendously more side effects?
Yeah. Cannabis isn't perfect. It doesn't come without its own, concern, because there is still addictive potential. However, nothing like what we're seeing with opioids, and, none of the same like withdrawal symptoms and everything for people who don't use. And then also promoting the use of cannabis, for these issues also isn't, you know, promoting, the use of it for everybody. And then as we look at it, a lot of the aversion that people have to cannabis comes from the aversion of just smoking in general, like smoking any substance. And quite frankly, that's not even the modality of choice for consuming cannabis. I think would be most effective for the athlete anyway.
What
And
would you
and
recommend?
it's
What's the
just
best modality that you recommend?
what's best is going to be what's most pertinent for the situation, right? So it's Sunday, you tear your ACL, they check you out, you're leaving the MRI machine, it's 9:30 p.m. You got to be up next morning to get into rehab, right? Like you're going to want something that onsets quickly, and effectively allows you to experience some relief and get some sleep, you might want to dab some concentrate. Or if you're completely averse to, any form of inhalation, then, there's some fast acting nano formulations of edibles that, you could consume, and sort of have a better idea of when that product's going to onset for you and provide those results, no differently than your doctor giving you, a bottle of Vicodin that comes along with the instructions. Difference being, right, this product is a plant that's not going to kill you or lead you to, an addictive lifestyle. And so, it just depends on the issue, right? If you've got more chronic issues, there's certainly, things that you got a sore hamstring. Every NFL locker room is loaded with like Bengay, right? Like it smells like that before practice. Everyone's getting taped up. Everyone's rubbing, some type of biofreeze Bengay on to get an analgesic effect that their muscles are warming up. Well, there's products that you can, infuse with cannabis and rub on that have many of those same effects with the same benefits of, reducing inflammation. So you're not just like feeling like you're getting relief, but you're actually being relieved.
Mm.
And so, there's so many options available in markets that have legalized, and the market's proliferated, and competition, creates all of these different products.
I love that, man. How is some of this being received by the NFL? What's the current drug testing policy, and what is the consequences for using any sort of cannabis products, and what does that look like now?
It's changed drastically with the last collective bargaining agreement, and hopefully it changes more drastically again here soon to where it's completely eliminated from the substances of abuse policy. It just shouldn't exist there, regardless of what the situation is now. The NFL or any other organization has no business testing its employees, its constituents for the use of cannabis. No adult needs to be tested for the use of cannabis. Um, and so, you're not testing adults for the use of opioids, for example, right? If you work for Salesforce, for example, you're not getting the Vicodin test when you go into work. Um, they might be interested in whether or not you're consuming recreational drugs, but um, you know, the fact that athletes are tested and punished, it's laughable. It's like we know so much now. I think most people would see that with an understanding of you guys need to change this. Like it's we're beyond this now. There's enough data out there to prove that you guys are wrong. And so, unless you can clearly articulate a different position, which you can't, change the rules and completely eliminate it from the substances of abuse policy. And in fact, since you commit so much money to, investing in player health and safety, invest a little in cannabis education. So at the very least, your players understand, who, what, where, when, why, how, cannabis can be a benefit to them.
Based on the current set of circumstances, if an NFL player consumes cannabis and is then drug tested, will they be suspended for a certain allotment of time?
It depends. It depends on when they test. If they're testing during the testing window, which is the training camp window. Other than that, players are able to consume if they choose. And many do, and many reach out and ask questions and have realized all the benefits that I have. And so again, we need to reach a climate across sports in general where, this is no longer a conversation, right? You shouldn't be concerned with whether or not a player consumes cannabis. In fact, you might want them to, in lieu of everything they put their bodies through, and their minds through.
No, that's a really good point. I think the big question, or at least if I was like a standardizing organization, would just be around dosage, right? Like it's easy to see the dosage that's being consumed from an opioid, and I'm
I
assuming
would
that
argue
probably
with
gets
you. I
diffused.
would I would have a hard argument with you just having so much, experience and knowledge in cannabis, not just using for myself, but owning a business where thousands of people have purchased our products and used them and reported on how it's impacted their lives. And so, when you talk about standardized dosing, unfortunately, the way cannabis works in our bodies isn't standard across any human.
That's a really good
And
point. That's cool to see.
the same cannabis that, yeah, 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 like the cannabis that you choose to promote sleep might, completely wake me up and have me ready for a workout. And so, I don't think it's about standardizing dosages, and also like your consumption level and your method of consumption also, play a factor in the frequency of your consumption, determine your tolerance level. And so you standardize a dose for somebody, and let's say you call it 5 milligrams as a standard dose. And like we look at traditional medicine as standardization, but where has that led us? Um, Standardization means you go up to the next dosage when you've reached sort of this plateau level with this one. And cannabis users are able to titrate their dosage, very easily just by consuming more plant. And so,
I wanna bookmark you real quickly right there. Something that's really important to note that I freaking love about podcasting, Eugene, is that like it was a moment, at least for me just now, of thinking about like, oh wow, like there's actually a dosage for caffeine that USADA puts out there, which is the drug testing agency for most professional sports. And there's a dosage that we see for traditional opioids. But something that's so cool to me is you're absolutely correct, which is we've had these dosage regulations and look where that got us. And one of my favorite things about rapping back and forth with a thought leader, an entrepreneur, and an edge seeker like yourself is like exactly that deconstruction of old school traditional thinking to then help popularize the integration of just new thought. Okay, cool. We had standard before, it didn't fucking work. So now it's like, let's try something new so that way we can have not only better performance, but elongate the careers of these incredible individuals that are now, as you mentioned, bigger, faster, stronger. And rather than it being the average career of 3 years, what if we can elongate that to 5 or 6 or even longer?
or at the very least, right? When even if that career is 3 years, this guy doesn't need to be addicted to painkillers when his 3 years are over, which probably ended because of injury, which that injury is still going to affect you a year later. And again, like 10 years later and
Mhm.
15 years later, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And so you don't want to, perpetuate a culture where we know players leave the game continually addicted to the same scripts that they got to keep them on the field. I mean, there's enough information out there now that, regardless of the stigma of the past, I think, we should be bold and demand it. Demand that things happen differently. And like again, this shouldn't be a tool of negotiation between the NFL and its players. It should just be what it is. Stop testing, get it out of the policy.
Move fast and break shit. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer. The zipper pocket is an absolute game changer. I go from training at the gym directly to meetings, running errands, or prepping for podcasts. The LSKD tribe has become true family, and we are excited to continue to develop our community. Shop now at lskd.com and use code ALLSMITH. We chase the vibe here at AllSmith. Let's all become 1% better every day. I like that, man. And we're seeing a similar problem with special forces or former military. They're going to the VA hospitals and they're getting prescribed opioids, and then their military career ends. And they're like, what now? They no longer have access to that stuff. And, then, walking the
I can't
streets of
see
some of
it
these.
right
Yeah,
now at this angle, but where I'm sitting, it's my guest house, but it's also my studio. And up on the mantle, I'm looking at Operation Iraqi Freedom, Camp Victory, Kuwait, 2003, United States of America, Joint Service Commendation Medal. So my partner, Leo Bridgewater, is a veteran. He and I run the Smoking Heroes podcast.
cool.
He's done a total of 10 tours between Iraq and Afghanistan during his time, both as a in service and as a contractor, and talks about these very things as it relates to, former military and the debilitating issues they have, which mirror what we see in athletics. And the fact that, even after they're no longer serving, access to cannabis becomes a problem. I dealt with this with my late uncle. Who could have benefited from cannabis in his last days and even prior, but it wasn't a conversation that his doctors at the VA could actually even have at the time. um, and so that's a huge opportunity, for us to help the people who served our country, to help them find relief, from the post-traumatic stress of the lives they lived in service, not just the mental debilitation, but the physical. My partner Leo blew his knees out jumping out of planes and uses cannabis on a daily basis, topical forms that he rubs on his knee. Um, and different, flower formulas he's found that, um, just, tend to allow him to get through his days without, needing to, knock down bottles of pills, that he would be prescribed if he went in to see his VA doctor.
What you're talking about, Eugene, unlocks so many different thought categories for me. The big one, relating back to what we were discussing offline, when my dad was battling brain cancer, it was legal at that time to then overprescribe the Dilaudid to help manage his pain, so that way their short staff could then disperse amongst all the other patients that were in the hospital. I get it. I understand it. But a major contributor to the issue with sick patients, not to mention just cancer, is weight loss, especially when it's related to all the chemo radiation therapy. And it's like, what's a huge contributor of cannabis is the onset of appetite. That could be an amazing thing that elongates the quality of people's lives. And then where I wanted to segment that to, Eugene, that I also think is really cool, is you mentioned the emotional and mental components that come from pain. Another great thing about cannabis is just the community orientation. We are naturally tribal creatures, and being able to interact with one another while consuming a product like that and story tell like we're doing today and go back and forth based on different experiences brings us together to then move the needle in the right direction.
Yeah, historically, cannabis has been communal, and for many reasons. Experiencing it with others is fun for many reasons. And like again, something I touched on before, just like we're beings that search for a community. And fortunately, the cannabis community is a very positive one overall, and one that's rooted in, you know, it's rooted in doing things for others. It's rooted in people who are growing cannabis with a purpose to serve and heal people. Um, and that part alone is fun for me. Being involved with people who, for a lifetime, have sort of built a passion for this, you know, out of necessity a lot, right? We see people whose family are dying, quite frankly, and cannabis has been the saving grace that in some cases have completely turned those situations around. Um, it's an awesome thing to have something that so many people from all walks of life can come together for all the same reasons, and fight for the proliferation, the legalization, and policy change and the involvement of cannabis.
Well, I love all the things that you're doing, man. I'm a big fan of what's going on. I'm happy to help. I love hearing the stories as to where it came from, who it's positively affecting, and just the combination of research, education, policy reform, and then just personal experience. Like, you're not speaking from just a theoretical component, you're speaking from a practical experience and then case studies that we've seen time and time again. And it sounds like that was one of the major contributors that eventually led to you co-founding Green Thumb Industries. What's that business venture been like, and how is it going?
Yeah, Green Thumb has grown to become one of the world's largest cannabis companies. Green Thumb did over 1.1 billion over the last year, and so being a part of that history is special to me. It was a great time of my life. It was a rapid learning experience from some titans in business who were already independently successful and were operating this new team, right? So that's my third team essentially. Jaguars, Ravens, GTI, kind of the third team I joined, and um, learned a ton, and have since started a new venture, a new few ventures in the cannabis space, which I'm so excited about. Bickles, one of my partners, and he and I are looking forward to getting these buildings constructed and producing our own product on the East Coast. So it's been fun, man. Again, like the journey's brought friends like Bickle along, who's the connection between you and I,
Totally.
which has
Just
nothing
to
to do
give
with
our
cannabis, but just community and connection and everything else, and fitness, of course.
Yeah, for sure. Just to give people some context, we've referenced the amazing hug dealer himself, Matthew Bickle, on the show a few times. How did you guys first meet, and what's been the business relationship? Is
Question: what do
he's
you
one?
know about Matt?
Oh
Like what?
man,
Like about his history?
so he's actually been on the podcast before, and being able to
Okay.
spend time with him just personally, first and foremost, like his emotional intelligence and willingness and ability to read between the lines is second to none. Seeing how he's overcome some of his adversity and his incredible weight loss journey is absolutely incredible. The overcoming of his divorce and the challenge that he had in his relationship, and being able to share strategies and coping mechanisms, and just being a man of support. When I went through some tough stuff last year, he was actually the first person to call me in the middle of the night and kind of help keep me on the right path, which I will forever be
That's what cannabis
appreciative
is
and
all
grateful for.
about.
Yep.
That's what cannabis is all about, man. That's what the community is all about. It's been nothing but, people reaching out, extending, helping one another. It's been fantastic. So, without even telling me, those things, I would have pinpointed and guessed that like your interaction with Bickle would have been nothing short of that. So, it's dope to hear, and it's glad. I'm glad that you're connected with him and that he connected you and me, man. That's a
Yeah,
special
totally.
dude.
Yeah, and one of
Yeah.
the best to understand and educate, motivate, and inspire people within the cannabis space, for sure. For sure. Lastly, man, what you got going on with Heart Community Capital? This seems like a really cool organization that provides roadmaps and resources and funding for people that are looking to start some cannabis startups. Peptides. There's been a lot of buzz about peptides and what they can do for the body, skin, muscles, and health. What exactly are they? And do they live up to the hype? Your body makes peptides. They are strings of amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. Peptide therapy involves using prescription-based peptides to help treat and manage a variety of health conditions to maximize performance. There are over 7,000 known functions of peptides in the body, and adequate levels in the body are imperative for performing at optimal levels. Discover a transformative journey to optimal well-being with Livv Peptides. Livv Peptides offer a natural and effective approach to health support. Embrace the difference. Choose Livv for a path to vitality that prioritizes quality, innovation, and your unique wellness goals. Head over to livvnatural.com and use code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides. That's LIVVNATURAL.com with discount code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides.
Yeah, Heart Communities, one of my companies that looks to and has already deployed capital in Black and brown businesses that are looking to make a name in the cannabis space that we believe in. That we've made an investment in a Massachusetts operation that is getting up and running. They're under construction now. Our core focus currently is investing in our own vehicle, which will then allow us to proliferate, more of these companies by way of providing them production through our facility. So, that's what Matt and I are charging towards building now. Heart being just a component of this bigger picture here. That we're fueling through our special purpose vehicle, Prolific Ventures, which is the vehicle that, we've developed to essentially, fund our businesses and provide our investors with a unique portfolio of not just cannabis investments, but we've got investments of our own that need funding, that we're bringing investors in to participate alongside us as we invest in our own deals as well. And then, looking for other opportunities across not just the cannabis space, but others, whether it's real estate, esports, and gaming, which is another one of my wheelhouses. And so that's been a fun venture that I'm spearheading, along with another former athlete, Xavier Rhodes, who was a first round pick to Minnesota out of Florida State some years ago, and has been entrepreneurial himself, and we invest alongside each other and run our fund. So, busy is fun. I'm blessed to have the opportunity to take on these projects and work with people I love, beyond the work. And none of it really feels like work. It's just like executing on, this vision that we have, and to align with so many people who believe in the same thing and put together this collective, which we call it Collective 60, which I spearhead. It's been a fun experience. And, between COVID and the challenges of doing, business in this space as a result, having people that are willing to stick with you through the time and challenges, it's edifying, and feels like, we've got the right people, on this ship. So, I'm sure as this thing develops more and we get shovels in the ground and we can really start, talking more about what we've got cooking. That's exciting. And then, if you're interested, if you're investing, man, I'd love to share the fund and show you, how we see these markets, understand sort of our investment strategy, and then also the portfolio that we've already deployed capital in a number of companies, and what we're looking at in terms of tracking engaging success. So love to have that convo with you too, man.
Yeah, totally, man. It sounds like you're doing such a great job diversifying your portfolio, integrating yourself into lots of different interests that can be tremendously impactful, but just the fortification of the heart and the community. And seeing how you and Bickle do that with fitness, with connection, with reaching out, with honest conversation, it's so inspiring, man. And I'm just thankful to connect with you today and be able to give our listeners a little peek behind the curtain as to how you've overcome adversity to get to a really unique edge in pursuit of your peak expression.
Yeah, I live a faith driven life. To say that God is the head of that is an understatement. And, um, it's been fun to be on this path and, come across people like Bickle who see that and then, start to mold their lives in that same way too. Because whether you're looking at faith from, a biblical perspective or just a actionable in the world, it's the same thing, right? Like having that unwavering belief, and when you do so, you find success, and like it's a biblical principle that's executable by anybody, whether you have faith, in God or not. um, and recognizing that, in community is awesome too. And yeah, like it's been fun. Like I got to call Bickle, right after this and tell him I connected with you here. And now that my shoulder's feeling better, and I'm, back traveling, I need to get myself out there and come see you guys. I was looking forward to spending some time in training this off season, but I got hurt and plans shifted. So yeah, but I'll be back out there.
We'll have you back in no time, man. And
Mm-hmm.
where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, I'm at Eugene Monroe on Instagram. Um, I'm not overly active there right now. I've got my hands in a lot of pots and I'm raising three kids. And so, while social media is important right now with the phase of my companies, what's most important is doing this work behind the scenes and ensuring that, my team is solid and we're doing things to achieve our goals. So, at some point when things are pumping, you'll see and hear a lot more about what I've got going on. But for now, we're working. We're just working, and sort of living in the moment instead of capturing it all the time, which is great, right? We want to capture and hold on to these moments, and it's awesome that we can look back on time in a way we never could before. Like I could only imagine if I had the kind of videos that my kids now have of my childhood. But, I'm sort of living it and also capturing it for them. I've always got a camera in my hand shooting the other way. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I look forward to coming out to San Diego, man.
I
I
look forward
appreciate
to
your
it.
time today. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's
You
been
brought
really
you brought
fun.
up a lot of good memories, a lot of good stuff, man. I got a lot of
That's great,
calls to
man.
make now.
Well, I'm thankful to be a little bit of a contributor to bringing those memories back. And like you said, man, working hard in the dark so you can shine in the light. I appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you when you come out here. For those of you listening, if you enjoyed my conversation with Eugene Monroe, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And remember, greatness is forged, not found. Until next time, guys.